Colleagues, we'll make a start, I think. We've got most of the people who said they were coming. There may be a few more who will join us over the next little while. Can I just ask first for everybody to check that they are in fact muted, because if not, we'll get a little bit of feedback which might impact on people's listening enjoyment or pleasure, as the case may be. Having said that, I'll make a start. Thank you for coming along for a little bit more information over the change proposal that we circulated last week. The forum today is really the beginning of a conversation about this. And there will be plenty of opportunities for further feedback later, which I'll go through in the slide. So first of all, thank you everybody for coming along. It's been an unusual weekend. Finding out Sunday mid-morning what's happening for your work life the next day is always interesting for everybody, and you're all bearing up very well, so thank you for that. I'll just make a slide. So before I go any further, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands and waterways on which we meet, and of our 3 campuses and all the places where you're zooming in from. The University of Southern Queensland acknowledges the cultural diversity of the Indigenous peoples from our areas and pays our respect to elders past, present and emerging. Colleagues, the reason for this change proposal, which was approved by the Vice-Chancellor's Executive last Wednesday, really there are a number of factors underlying the proposal that you have before you. The first is that the Faculty of Health, Engineering and Sciences has grown quite quickly over the last 5 years. We've seen a very rapid growth in student load. And we're also anticipating, with the launch of new programs in ag technology and management, and also the new programs in allied health, which will include occupational therapy, speech pathology, social work and physiotherapy. The experience at other universities is that those programs are all very substantial programs, and they will generate quite a lot of student interest, and we would expect that, you know, schools will get bigger as a result of those. So that's one piece of the puzzle. A second piece of the puzzle is the release of the new strategic plan that was approved by Council not that long ago. Included within it flagship areas in health and also agriculture, in addition to the existing, I guess, previously identified areas in engineering and advanced engineering, and also in regional development. My experience travelling around our region is that, particularly in that agriculture flagship area, there is not a lot of awareness of what the university is doing, more so in the teaching programs than in the research programs. So, for example, I will commonly be asked by school principals, why doesn't the University of Southern Queensland offer agriculture programs? We have to send all of our students to UNE. I've heard that more times than I'd care to think about. And so while we have strong performance in research in agriculture and agricultural engineering, that's not necessarily something that translates to the general community in our region's awareness of what we do. And some of you will notice that the DVC Research and Innovation, John Bell, is here. This is a proposal that I've discussed extensively with him. And of course, one of the key changes is that business around agriculture. The other area that led to this is the faculty's done a lot of work in improving its learning and teaching and student success and the student journey, but we are also seriously engaged in a process of lifting our research capacity and supporting our academic staff to do better at research. And some of that research capacity is about bringing like-minded people together. That's the third reason for the proposal. So with that background, I will move on to the proposed structure. So in brief, the faculty currently has 6 schools. We are looking to move towards 7. That includes establishing a School of Agriculture and Environmental Science. The School of Health and Wellbeing will become a School of Allied Health, but the human services disciplines within that school will move to the current School of Psychology and Counselling. That's a significant change for that team, but we're hoping that that will allow some synergies, particularly as we develop our social work programs moving forwards. The 2 schools of engineering will rejoin to form one single School of Engineering. However, the surveying, regional planning and construction management programs will be moved to a standalone school. The rationale for that is that there is a real unique opportunity for the University of Southern Queensland, particularly in that surveying space. We're the only university in Queensland who offers surveying. There's an incredible demand for graduates of that program, and yet the surveying load has not grown significantly over the last 5 years in the way some of our other programs have. So we think we're perhaps missing an opportunity having that cluster of disciplines within the engineering school. So the proposal includes bringing those disciplines out into a standalone school. And then the final significant change is with the creation of the Agriculture and Environmental Science School, those disciplines will move out of the current School of Sciences, which will become a school comprising maths and physics, statistics, and the computer science disciplines. So you'll see there the School of Physical and Computational Sciences. The School of Nursing and Midwifery will be the only school not directly impacted by these changes. So, colleagues, it's a fairly substantial and significant set of changes here. We are looking, as part of the establishment of particularly the School of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences, to look at the creation of a number of new continuing academic positions that will be available to internal applicants. And that will be an opportunity for folk who are currently employed within R&I to consider moving across to a school. They would continue to maintain their affiliation with their current research centre or institute. I should have said earlier, and apologies, this was the only thing I was really supposed to remember at the beginning, and I've managed to succeed in forgetting it. But if you have questions, if you can put them in the chat function, and I'll come to the questions at the end. And also at the end, we'll have an opportunity for people to ask questions using the raise the hand function. We'll be capturing your questions and the answers, and that will be available on the SharePoint site, which I will tell you about shortly. So just to summarise, this is the existing structure of the Faculty of HES. You can see the 6 schools that we currently have and the disciplines within them. At the moment, each of those schools has a school support officer. You will have noticed that we'll move from 6 to 7 schools. So it is our intent to create 2 new school support officer positions, one for the 7th school, and one because if you think about each of those people having 4 weeks of annual leave, as well as the fact that 2 of the schools will be fairly significant in size, nursing and midwifery and engineering, we believe there's ample work for an 8th person to support the other 7. Moving to what the new structure would look like, and this is to give you an idea of the discipline groups in the different schools. Now, there are some people who straddle disciplines. So, for example, some of the people who are working in environmental engineering might identify with civil engineering as much as environmental engineering. They might be working on urban water infrastructure, for example. There are some people who work in both chemistry and ag science or food science, for example. So as part of the consultation and implementation, people will be able to express a view of where they believe their home sits, but we won't be able to have a situation where disciplines just integrate and spread across all the schools, because obviously that will defeat the intent. The other important point to raise is that what you see here is proposed. This is a genuine process. We're genuinely interested in your feedback. And if other structures that we think will work better emerge from that, well, we're open to pursuing those. And the other thing to be stressed here is the names that you see there are proposed names. They're not finalised names. It will be up to schools to work through final names as part of an implementation strategy. The intent is to move to the new structure from the 1st of January next year. In terms of the process from here, this was in the document that I circulated to you last Thursday, but essentially we've got consultation up until Tuesday, the 24th of August. And then we'll take a week to sit back and think about what you've told us, your feedback, to review it, reflect on it, and then we will review the change proposal, and it will be released 30th of August, 16th of September. Final feedback will close at the end of September. And then the intent is to have the final implementation nailed down by mid-October, as you can see there. From there, we will launch straight into implementation activities with a view to having new structures in place for the start of next year. Clearly, there are several steps involved with me touching base with my colleagues, the Vice-Chancellor's executive, and they will need to see the finalised change proposal as part of that process. Just to remind you, we actually haven't made any decisions here. The proposal that you've seen has been based on a fair bit of discussion with various of you over the last 12 to 18 months. But no final decisions have been made. We're open to suggestions if people think that this won't work, or if they have other structures which they think would work better. So it's a genuine consultation process, and I really do encourage you to provide feedback. I also, just by the way, encourage you to provide feedback if you like the proposal, because
I think they said it should be fine, but I don't know if it's
just letting you know, Lauren, just letting you know that you're speaking to a couple of hundred people at the moment. Where was I? I would invite feedback from you if you like the proposed structures, as well as if you have proposed changes, because if the only feedback we get is from people who want to see it changed, it will be difficult for us to get a sense of what you as a community, where you're sitting. So please provide feedback, even if it's just to say that you're supportive of the changes. That will be helpful for us. In terms of how to provide feedback, we've set up a mailbox that is confidential. So the submissions to that mailbox will be summarised, and pasted into a spreadsheet that is de-identified, I will not know who has provided what feedback, and nor will any of the other senior managers or people running this change process. We have got a SharePoint site that is now live, and once we get your questions from today, we'll put up some frequently asked questions there. And also, if you would like to make a time to speak with me, and one or two of you have already sent an email in to my office seeking time to do that, I'm clearing my diary as much as I can to make myself available. I'm also attending a couple of school forums over the coming days as well. Remember that the feedback closes 24th of August, and change processes can be disruptive for people and stressful for some people, and if you need support or assistance, please reach out to our EAP program. It is confidential. On that, I just want to emphasise this change proposal is not about reducing staff. There is no aspect of this which involves shedding positions. In fact, it's likely to lead to a net increase in positions. So none of you need to feel that this in any way is threatening for you, other than that some of you may be in a different school. So I'll hand over to questions. Before I do say, I might just, John, if there's anything you'd like to add briefly, and then we'll go to questions.
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. I was thinking about putting my hand up, but you preempted me. So yeah, I'd just like to say to everyone, I have discussed this extensively with Glenn. I've also been discussing with the Vice-Chancellor's executive how we can establish a far more robust staffing structure across the whole university for our research. At the moment, there are a lot of people in R&I who live on a fairly hand-to-mouth existence from one grant to the next, many who've been here for a long time. And I think we need to develop a structure which is essentially, I think, the sort of structure that Glenn is talking about in the School of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, if I've got it right. And I think this is a really good opportunity for us to actually test out how we can actually make that sort of structure work within the university. We need to ensure that we're boosting our research over the next few years, because we've got a requirement to do so to maintain our university status, and I think this is a really good opportunity for us to try that. Having said that, just like Glenn, this is not necessarily a perfect proposal. There may be something which is much better, which can emerge from discussions. And I also think, and Glenn and I have also discussed this, there's probably, once we actually finalise the proposal, quite a bit of work for us to do, not necessarily immediately, but over the next 12 to 18 months, to actually start establishing some new processes around research funding, etc., so that we can ensure that the sort of school that Glenn's envisaging there can thrive, and also that our institutes will remain a really important part of our research. So we need to ensure that we do both of those things. Our institutes and centres are where we lead our research from at the moment, and certainly lead our flagships from, and I think that's a really important component of where we will be going forward as well. So that's all I wanted to say. Any questions? Happy to take them, just like Glenn is.
So colleagues, I don't see many questions in the chat, but now is your opportunity to seek points of clarification. Sorry, I've got a question from Grant. Is it anticipated that the head of school positions with the new schools will be externally advertised? The answer to that is yes, they will, Grant. However, it may be that the process, well, I hope the recruitment process is completed by the end of this year. We obviously won't preempt that, so we have to wait for the final change document to be agreed. Then we'll go to market. So it may be that we will have acting heads for at least a couple of those schools until any successful candidate is able to be appointed. but clearly part of the rationale is to grow in some of those areas, and so going external makes sense from that perspective. Does anybody else have any other questions? So there's a point from Dr. Billingsley there about robotics in agriculture doesn't easily map onto a field of research, and the rearrangement might be moving them apart. It's a good question. It's a good point, John, because there are some areas which obviously overlap. So we probably have people right across the institution working on agriculture problems. They might be agribusiness, they might be mechanical or electrical engineers working on different aspects of technology associated with agriculture. So we're going to have to work through which people it makes sense to have in that school. And part of that will be about the focus of their research or their teaching program, and also where they fit in a disciplinary sense. But that is one of the complexities we're going to have to deal with. I'll go to Rod, and then I'll go to the questions in the chat. So Rod, do you want to go next?
Glenn, thank you for taking my question. I acknowledge these changes as described thus far are centred around the academic stuff, so I appreciate you taking time for a professional staff member. 3 professional staff were recently moved from OALT to HES in what was a very tumultuous restructure. This included 1 staff member being told that they had a role in stages 1 and 2 and that they didn't have a role in stage 3. That was all settled 15 days ago, and we've now walked into yet another restructure. Is there any plans or intent in any of the stages 1, 2 or 3 to include the professional staff in this restructure?
Rod, the staff who've moved into the faculty from OALT work with the associate deans at that faculty level, and they work with different programs and disciplines as the faculty identifies the need. So I think that will continue whether the people you're working with are in the School of Sciences or the School of Agriculture and Environmental Science. So clearly for professional staff, such as technical staff and school support officers, there will be some impact in terms of who they are working with, or as the ag programs grow, we might need to revisit our technical staff and support in those areas. But in terms of who you report to and who you work with, I don't believe this will impact on those staff who've come across from OALT. The main area of impact for professional staff is in those school support roles. And as I've said already, we're planning to increase staffing in those areas to help those people manage the workload. John, before I go to the questions in the chat, did you want to add something?
Yeah, look, it was just a quick comment following on from John's question. That's a classic problem with any organisational structure. Robotics, classic engineering discipline, but it can be applied in agriculture, it can be applied in health. And I think one of the things that we've got to try to ensure is that we have these cross-disciplinary venues for our researchers and our academics to be able to actually apply their skills in areas where it may be outside their academic school, but it may be within one of the flagships or one of our centres and institutes. And so the barriers within universities are often problems for that. What we've got to try and work out is to create schools without actually creating barriers at the same time to people doing that sort of work.
Thanks, John. I'll just go to a couple of questions in the chat, and if I miss any, Annette will let me know, I hope. Sonia, in terms of your question, has there been consultation with Queensland Health around the potential grouping schools in health? What I can tell you is we've had quite a number of discussions with the Office of the Chief Allied Health Officer, and also with our colleagues at Darling Downs Health and West Moreton Health. To be perfectly straight with you, they've been more around the development of the new programs rather than around the structuring of the schools. So that's one I'll take on notice. I think the intent with those changes in the schools with the new allied health programs is to best support delivery and implementation of strong new allied health programs, and spreading the load across the two schools a bit, I think, will help with that. But we can certainly talk to Liza Jane McBride and co about what we're planning to do. So I'll take that one on notice. And then Polly asked a question about if your teaching area fits a new school, but your research areas don't necessarily. I guess, Polly, what I'm looking at discipline level in terms of what schools best fit where, but if you have a concern that you should stay in one area rather than another, that's something you could provide to us in your written feedback. I'm assuming most people's research is not wildly different from their teaching, but I know that there will be some people where that's not the case.
Yeah, I was just asking.
If John's partially answered your question. I'll let you say something, Polly.
Yeah, no, it was just in the context that the Ag and Enviro school was noted in your document as potentially being research intensive. And yes, some areas do fit there for me, but not others, because my background's actually materials engineering. So yeah, just putting the question out there about how that would be navigated.
Thanks, Polly. Sonia also has a question about, do I see a pathway for digital health data analytics? And she points out the growing need for frontline clinicians to develop expertise in collection and use of big data. Sonia, that is an excellent question. And in fact, Marion Gray, the Associate Dean Clinical, has among her many list of projects some work around new programs in health information management. And Karen and Barbara and I have been talking about that as a potential new program area. And there are quite a few people, particularly in the information systems area already, as you probably know, who work in health systems as part of their research area. So short answer is yes, we are exploring that. We do see a future there. I think we're probably a bit early on the journey to determine what that means for an organisational structure, because it's not something that we're explicitly doing at the moment. Sonia, I don't know if that answers, I can't actually see you, Sonia, so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but hopefully it does.
Yes.
And then Gavin has a question about, do we have any more detail on the process for staff to express interest in being attached to a particular school? Colleagues, the intent at the moment is to have a look at the staffing profile in relevant research institutes and centres, and from that and from analysis of where we think the ag, tech and management and the environmental science programs are going, to identify a number, and that's part of the work over the next 4 to 8 weeks, a number of positions that we would advertise internally as part of the creation of the new school. And then staff who are currently employed in research and innovation division, often on fixed term or contingent funded contracts, would be able to apply to move across to a continuing appointment. Now, clearly, the needs of a teaching and research school is a little different to the needs of a research-focused institute. And so there would be a recruitment process where staff are going to have to address their preparedness and capacity to contribute in all areas of the normal academic portfolio. In other words, in teaching and service and support and development of the emerging new schools. So that's the intent at this stage, but that is part of the piece of work we're doing over the next 6 to 8 weeks as well. Zara has asked if we're going to have associate head positions for each school, or these positions, or will they be combined for multiple schools? Zara, the intent is that each school will have its own committees and associate heads. Now, it happens in the Faculty of HES, in most of our schools, these are due for going back for expressions of interest for next year anyway. So as part of that normal process of calling for expressions of interest and appointing people in the latter part of the year, we will be seeking to identify associate heads for the new schools. I'm just looking at the positions. Gavin has another question. Would being a research-intensive school have any implications for workload allocation of staff? From Gavin, we would expect academics who are moving across from R&I into the new school or schools to have a research track record that would mean that they would be receiving a higher research allocation than a person who normally commences work as a TNR academic at the university. So in other words, their research allocation would be at the higher end of the range rather than at the standard 20%, which is where most people commence. And that has been factored into the number of positions that we will create there. Gavin, I don't know if that's answered your question, and I can't see you either, but I hope it has. And John, if you want to jump in on any of these, just put your hand up and let me know.
I think you're absolutely right. There would be an expectation that most of those people would probably be more research intensive currently, therefore have a higher workload.
They would clearly need to have a teaching allocation, though, because they will be moving to a teaching and research role.
Absolutely.
And then
Yeah.
Stephen's asked a question in relation to sport and exercise. Adding sport and exercise to the title of the School of Allied Health could be warranted. Has this been discussed? Stephen, it hasn't been discussed, but it's certainly in the mix. And I just want to re-emphasise a point I made earlier. The names that you see in the discussion paper are starting points for discussion, not end points. And so as we go to the implementation phase in the last quarter of the year, that is one of the things that I will expect schools to work through themselves. It can sometimes be contentious. I see Peter Murray's on the call. He may remember experiences from a previous life where names of new units became quite a contentious issue. So I would only intervene if I felt the schools couldn't reach a consensus. But essentially, we would like that to be a bottom-up sort of process. I'm just moving down the chats. Grant's had a question. Taken any academic positions currently under development in relation to ag and environment that the School of Sciences may be put on hold while the staff mapping you mentioned is undertaking? Grant, I don't think so. I think those positions that we've identified for recruitment are positions we know we need, but I will take that on notice and come back to you in the school. But there's some fairly pressing work that needs to be done in some of those areas. And so my first response is we'll keep going, but let me just pause and think that through with Karen and John, and I'll come back to the school. And similarly, Shah Jahan has a comment about questions, and I'll just refer to my earlier answer, Shah Jahan. This is something that I'm hoping folks will work through as part of the implementation phase. Now, Sonia's got a question that Tracy, I can see Tracy's agreed with, but I haven't actually read, so I'll read it through. So Sonia Marches asks, will there be more of an opportunity for development of interdisciplinary courses that cut across schools of health to nurture interprofessional collaboration in work and research, and also for faculty-based courses that cross health at postgrad and undergraduate levels, such as evidence-based practice and change management? Sonia, it's music to my ears, and the answer is an emphatic yes. Intrinsic to the development of the new programs is an interdisciplinary approach. And so part of our pitch for the new programs, there is two aspects. One is that our students will be enmeshed in an interdisciplinary way of thinking from the start of first year. And secondly, that those programs will also explicitly be conscious of rural and regional workforce health needs. And so they are meant to be two of the defining features of the programs. I think more broadly, both within the faculty and actually between our faculty and Bella, there is not enough joined up cross-disciplinary approaches to teaching. And the university for a long time has thought that schools own programs, and that I think has been damaging because schools have only looked within their own community to see who is best placed to develop these programs. And when I think about the fantastic work that Odette and her colleagues have done in nursing and midwifery, thinking about working with First Nations peoples, for example, clearly we want to leverage that sort of expertise in thinking through and developing our allied health programs. So this is in no way meant to create new barriers to working across school boundaries. And in fact, even though we don't work across school boundaries here very much, the budget model doesn't particularly reward you for not doing that. And at other universities, that's a real barrier. So there's no reason why we can't. It's just been our way of working up until now. Tracy, I'll come to you before I go back to the questions in chat.
Hi, just sorry about all the background noise. I wanted to say that from my experience in public health, there certainly seems to be an ethos for different schools who want to contribute to programs outside of their schools. And we need that in public health. But when it comes down to the nuts and bolts, then it becomes a workload issue. Comments like, this isn't part of our school, or you taking our students. So some of those kinds of barriers need to be addressed when we're looking at these courses that cut across disciplines and schools.
I hear you, Tracy. It's always easier to work within your own discipline and within your own team than to reach out across boundaries. However, the university students, they're not schools. The students are here for the university experience. They're not here for the health and wellbeing or the School of Sciences experience. And it's our duty to give them the best experience we can, both in terms of, you know, just the student support, but also the quality of the programs they offer. And there's no way we can train students, particularly in health, to work across disciplines if we're not prepared to do it ourselves. So
I agree completely, Glenn. And I agree completely. And I just think from the public health perspective, we're highly dependent and would want involvement from other schools. So even environmental sciences and planning, when I'm looking at that, I'm going, oh, I see a space for them to contribute as well and involve them. I think it just comes down to workload and it's the minutia of it where people then become unstuck and go, oh, sorry, I can't help anymore.
Yep, I'll take all that on notice. I would like to say I have an easy solution for you, Tracy, but I don't. It's just something we're just going to have to keep grinding away and working at. And I just remind everybody in the faculty that we're currently doing a large review of the Bachelor of Science. And part of the intent of that is that it is a program owned by all schools in the faculty. And I have to say, when we've done workshops on the Bachelor of Science, we haven't been overwhelmed with engagement from people outside of the School of Sciences. So there's an opportunity there, but also, as you say, Tracy, developing new programs. I'll just come back to the questions, and I'm sorry if I feel like I'm rushing on from one person to the other. I'm just conscious that there's quite a few questions to go. Rajib has asked, what would the advice for the current and future activities around employability and will for the schools be? And look, Rajib, I think your school's been doing some really great work in that area, and just keep going with this. Obviously, I'll need to talk with Karen and the associate deans and the associate heads as we move to the new structures next year. But I don't think any of this should stop what we're doing at the moment, so it's full steam ahead. I like Sonia's comment about medical humanities and poly multidisciplinary work, encouraging that. And as I think John was alluding to earlier, you know, big research problems now, they're always multidisciplinary. And if you're going to put together teams to go and work on big problems, they're going to have to work across disciplines. So you're going to need people from outside the corridor on your office, quite possibly. And David's got a question about construction and would it be better with engineering than moving across to the new school? David, it is one of those tricky areas, I think. And so that's something that you might want to provide feedback in, either yourself or from your team. My observation on construction is that while that program is one of, so for example, in New South Wales, it's one of the most popular programs through the New South Wales equivalent of QTAC. And yet at this university, we're lucky to get a handful of students into it. So my observation is that construction has not benefited from being in a School of Engineering to date. And my thinking about putting it into a new school is that it will allow that head and the leadership team of that new school to really focus on building load in those three program areas. But if you and your team have a different view, please feel free to put that in your feedback. Polly's asked about service teaching the principle of service teaching, I think, continues, Polly. It's particularly important for that proposed School of Physical and Computational Sciences because, of course, there's a lot of service teaching of maths across engineering and education programs. I can't see Karen's face where I am, and you might want to jump in, Karen, but I think the university remains committed to the idea that the disciplines who have that expertise should do that teaching wherever possible. So in other words, service teaching is unaffected.
Yeah, absolutely. So unaffected, service teaching was a big part of both the current School of Sciences and more broadly into the School of Health, current School of Health and Wellbeing. So we are committed to that, and the discipline home should be where the discipline sits. So.
Polly?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just mentioning the weird one, SCI 1001, where we had lecturers from across a range of schools. So where that sits in future, I don't know. So physical computational or elsewhere, or how will that go? That's the only thing.
Look, I think we continue to get the best people to deliver in the courses, regardless of what the school boundary is. And look, it's simply a fact that as professional programs evolve and with external accreditation requirements, quite often what used to be standalone basic science and maths courses have to be enveloped into broader courses. You'll see that in the nursing program, for instance. And we just need to create structures where the best people are still contributing to those courses. We shouldn't be, and we have no intent of using it as an excuse to sort of get chemistry out of, I don't know, animal science or something. So the best people contribute. I'm just going to keep going. Sonia, I love the question about the liberal arts programs, and I'm going to forward that one on to Karen and Barbara for us to talk about separately. Certainly, both in the Bachelor of Science and the BA, there's a lot of work as part of the academic plan into rethinking what those programs look like and what the honours programs in those programs look like. In our faculty, the BSc honours is, if you take out the psychology students, is a fairly weak anemic looking thing. And so the Associate Dean Academic is having another look at that program this year. And critical to that will be engaging with our colleagues in R&I, because there is a lot of great work that those students could be working on in centres and institutes as part of a pathway to PhDs. So quite a lot of work there. I'm just going to keep moving on unless anybody puts up their hand. Greg, has consideration been given to the increase of work on APS staff with the addition of an extra school? Greg, we're not increasing the number of programs or the number of students or courses as part of this proposal. So I don't think this change in itself increases the workload of APS staff. But what we are keeping under review is, as our student load grows, both in nursing and health and with these new programs coming online, it's likely that with more students, we're going to need more APS staff. And that also, with the academic plan work and a lot of curriculum work, we're very conscious that that team has been really going above and beyond in our faculty for the last 12 months or so, at least since the start of the pandemic. So I take your point on notice, and we are monitoring their workload, but I don't believe this change itself will create additional workload for them. Lainey hasn't heard about the Bachelor of Science review, so Lainey, I'll take that one on notice and I will resend that out. And Annette, I know you're listening there somewhere, if you can just make a note, but we will resend out to people information about the Bachelor of Science review and the fact that we want schools across the faculty to contribute to that. I doubt very much you've been living under a rock, Lainey, so it could be comms at our part, or it could be just that you've been dealing with the ever-changing placement COVID situation and you've missed an email or something, but we'll follow it up anyway. Yeah, good one, Karen. Karen saying, keep your ideas coming in about better cross-disciplinary contributions in teaching. And Teresa's going to follow that up. Yeah, and then Sonia's pointed out that we might want to have a look at the research profiles, STEM versus non-STEM. We've done quite a lot of analysis, Sonia, around likely staffing and student load. But it's a fair comment that we probably haven't done as much work on what the research performance in those different areas will look like. And I'm sure John could say that research data is not the easiest thing in the world to get until we get our new research management system in place, but I think we could do a bit more work in that area.
Glenn, I'm also just thinking, when you have a school that's sort of made up of quite different profiles, you know, people who are looking at STEM expectations and non-STEM expectations, that's a blurry line to be sort of expecting one thing of some people and a different level of others.
And
Yeah.
Sonia, just to respond to that, our biggest challenge at the moment is the only way in which we divide up our research currently is by school. There's nothing in our data systems which allows us to say this particular set of people is in STEM and this is in non-STEM, even within the same school. So we'll improve that, and that'll make it easier for heads of school to be able to articulate clearly the sorts of expectations.
And the only thing I'd add, Sonia, is in some of our schools, like Chris McClellan's, not Chris McClellan's school, but in the current School of Health and Wellbeing and the current School of Sciences, they're already in those quite disparate disciplines. And so we have enough flexibility to think about research expectations by discipline. I think the minimum research performance, that will be addressed partly by the research active definition that, you know, academic board and others have been engaged in, but that will set a floor. But then in terms of progression beyond that, both the promotions process and the individual schools, I think, will have capacity to take into account disciplinary differences. So, colleagues, we've got 5 minutes to go. There's been lots of questions, which is really fantastic. You may have others. I've given you the email for that. Does anybody have any final questions or comments or feedback that they'd like to share before we finish up? Or if not, Karen or John, would either of you like to make any concluding comments? Karen first.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks very much for putting this together and putting the proposal to the faculty and the R&I division today. I think importantly to emphasise points you've already made, that this is a genuine process of consultation, that all feedback will be considered. We're keen to hear from you the things that you like, as well as the things that you've got suggestions about that might where you think there might be some tension created. We can deal with the information that we receive through this process through whatever means it's provided. But importantly, this is a strategic alignment piece for the faculty going forward. And it's a new way of thinking about how we bring our research efforts and our learning and teaching efforts together at a school and faculty level. And this is certainly a commitment from both John and I, working with the executive deans about new ways of breaking down what have been some quite serious boundaries between academic and R&I in the past. So we really think this is a fantastic opportunity for all of you to become engaged in that conversation, and we look forward to hearing from you about your suggestions of how this can work better.
Thanks, Karen. John, did you have any?
No, look, I'd just like to echo Karen's comments. I think we've got a lot of potential opportunities that this is creating. It's the sort of direction that we've got to move more, breaking down the barriers between our organisational units at whatever level is really critical to us being able to achieve everything that we can achieve. So that's all I'd like to say. Oh, and just to add, we do have an R&I forum tomorrow to discuss this, so that those who couldn't make it because of the 300 Zoom limit will be able to come to another meeting tomorrow.
Thanks, John. So, colleagues, there will be an email coming out today with direct links to the SharePoint site and the email for confidential feedback. I really want to thank everybody for engaging with the conversation today. It's great to see so many questions and discussion, and also to thank you all for the hard work in coping with all the whiplash from lockdown, not lockdown, face mask on, face mask off, don't go to Toowoomba, do go to Toowoomba, all the rest of it. So, colleagues, I know it's been a full-on few weeks, but please, if you can find time to provide any feedback on the change document, I'd really value it. And thank you very much for your time and for engaging with this today.